Y'all know here at the podcast, I love more than anything bringing on people who I know in a personal capacity. The vast amount of people that I bring on the podcast, I know them in real life. Today is no exception. In fact, I would say that this is a long time coming. So today on the podcast, we have the ever amazing, glowing, radiating, brilliant Jenna Kutcher on the podcast. But I just have to tell you, Jenna and I go way back. I think if my memory serves me correctly, we knew each other starting somewhere in the ballpark of around 2010 or 2011. Okay, it's been over a decade. Now, here's a crazy thing. I taught an online class. It was kind of rare. We're like, I'm going to teach this online class and I'm going to gather a group of people to come and get together around this topic of photography, specifically building a photography business. And I was like, does anybody want to join me as we record this live class? And this crazy, amazing, talented person by the name of Jenna submitted a video.
Hi, Jasmine and Creative Live team. My name is Jenna Kutcher, and I am a Wisconsin-based wedding and lifestyle photographer. I started my business just over a year ago and filled my summer with weddings, enough to leave my corporate America job. Although I feel like I have all the ingredients to be a successful photography business owner, I feel like my recipe could still be perfected. I would love to work with you and your team in Seattle to restart my business and make sure I'm off on the right foot.
So Jenna, talk to me about where our paths intersect at that point in time.
Yeah. You know, it's so crazy because every once in a while I'll log into YouTube and I do not have a YouTube channel, like an actual hopping one. And so it is like one of 10 videos on there and I will not remove it because it is just so humbling.
Well, here's the thing. Hold on. We're probably going to insert a little bit of that audio because Jenna sent me that video. She's like, okay, in preparation, like shout out to over a decade of our paths intersecting. So
my voice is different. The way I talk is different. I knew about your dog Polo. So it's really wild when you think about the timing back then because there were very few resources out there. Like we look at the world now and there's just like information everywhere. And so your blog was this massive resource. And I remember when you announced what you were doing, I applied and it was kind of funny because you and I don't know if you remember this part, but we got on a Zoom call and JD was on it. And there is one of your friends, Brianna. Was it Brianna?
Oh my God, Jenna, stop right now. I was like, I'm literally flashing back to this moment. I totally forgot.
And I was trying to take a screenshot of the fact that we were on a phone call together and my computer made a weird noise because I wanted like evidence. So we spoke. And the funniest part is that we got on the call and you were asking me about my business and you go, you don't need this. Like you don't need to restart your business. You're in really good shape. And it was funny because I remember being like simultaneously like overjoyed that like my hero thought I was like doing things right. But also I was like so sad because I was like, no, but I still want your help. Okay,
hold on. We have to fill in the gaps. Okay, so for people who don't know, you might be living under a rock and not familiar with who Jenna Kutcher is. She is a Minnesota wife, mother, entrepreneur, and let's not forget the most recent title, New York Times best-selling author. Go on, Queen. So most people will see that, Jenna has this massive lifestyle brand. She's an educator. She has just really pivoted and grown her businesses in many different beautiful ways. But when Jenna and I first met, we met by way of photography. And the class that I was teaching was this class called Restart. It was restarting your photography business. Jenna obviously was wildly talented, had this really great business going for her. And I was like, it was kind of like a person who was like, I need a makeover, but I'm like, girl, you fly. Like, what can we fix? And that's what Jenna is saying, like, hey, I really wanted to restart. But there's a whole beautiful weaving of how Jenna and I intersected and how our lives have taken very different and then somewhat similar paths. Yeah. And so today, the value isn't just the fact that I get to hang out with a beautiful, brilliant soul. The goal here is to look at what the last decade has happened for Jenna and say, how have you been able to look at something that might have looked insurmountable, might have looked something completely foreign, and then intermix that with doing a bunch of new things very successfully, and then including the journey to becoming a mother, the journey to growing a wildly amazing business, the journey of growing a team. So as there's different iterations in the business, if somebody's listening right now and they're just like, I don't know where to begin, I know that something else is calling or beckoning me, this is the conversation. Jenna's book, How Are You Really? This book is really taking the opportunity for people to ask that question and then set out a plan. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So I want to talk about your book.
Yeah.
And congratulations on all the big stuff that's coming. Now, it's not just a New York Times bestseller. What, like, other things have happened?
Wall Street Journal, USA Today. But you know what's crazy is like just seeing it in people's lives. Like somebody texted me a picture of it on their wife's nightstand, and I was like, that right there. Like I get to be her voice while she goes to bed. That's it. It's crazy.
Well, you get to be her voice before you go to bed, but then you also get to see like your book shown in New York Times Square. Come on. So if you go back to Jenna 2011 and 2012, like over a decade ago, and you are where you are now, if you look back at that, what has been a few significant patterns in your life that you spotted and said, this is the time for me to change? Because right now, people might be having a feeling that something needs to change. But what was the pattern looking back to say, now is the time? Now is the time I need to change.
You know, it's crazy because you and I have had very parallel paths. And I don't know if this is the same for you, but lately I've been thinking about, for a lot of people, you know, the whole line of like, pursue your passions. I think a lot of people are feeling passionless. Like they're like, yeah, I could move in that direction if I knew what that direction was, but I don't even know. I was listening to a meditation the other day and there was this line in it. And it was like, for all of us, there once was a fire, but for many of us, there now feels like there's ashes. And I thought about that line in the sense of passion, because I think a lot of us have been in survival mode and we're sick of pivoting or being resilient and adaptable. And so when I think about like the adverse side of like, pursue your passions, I really think that the fact of the matter for me is many times when I pivoted, it hasn't always been knowing what I'm moving towards, but instead looking at what I'm moving away from, what I no longer want. And so when I think about like all of the directions in my life, like in my book, it outlines so many different career pivots. But when I think about like starting my photography business, I didn't necessarily want to become a photographer, but I knew that when my corporate job handed me a 5-year plan without consulting me of what do you want in 5 years, I was like, I am moving away from this. Like if I don't take control of my plan, someone is literally going to hand it to me and say, here's your life. And so much of my life has been like, how am I moving away from things that no longer fit, no longer serve me, whether it's an identity or a job or a passion that maybe fizzled. And so even looking at our photography days, you referenced slightly like about growing our family, like there was a lot of hardship in growing our family. And I didn't necessarily know what I was moving towards, but I was moving away from a business that required me to show up when I was having a human moment. And so it's like, as I look at how things have unfolded, I haven't always known where I was going to, but sometimes all I needed in order to move was to know what I was moving away from.
So somebody is in this spot and they deeply identify and it's resonating and it doesn't want to, because we want the secure thing. We want to know what we're moving to. So somebody's like, okay, fine. Let me test what Jenna is saying. Let me move away from the thing I don't want. Yeah. What are the first things? And I know you do a lot of outlining in the book. And here's the thing. What I always, Jenna, I will tell you, people who listen to the podcast, I definitely stay away from like the book trains. Yeah. Because everybody comes in. But there was something about first and foremost, was something about you, but there was something about the book. And the book is taking what we hold as a paradigm, having your plan, knowing where you're moving to, setting it out, setting those goals. But that is super intimidating. And this was the unique perspective that I'm like, oh, I am here for this. So let's get back into, you know, what you're moving away from. What are those things that we know that we're going to move to? How?
So when you think about right now, there's like the great resignation happening, like over 70% of the workforce is looking for other jobs. And I think it's beautiful in the sense of like, people are saying like the system no longer works. Like the way that we are, you know, expected to show up in the workplace doesn't work for the lives we want any longer. But it also slightly terrifies me because I've seen this in you as well. I am someone who will not just abandon everything that has gotten me to a point in order to pursue the next thing. I leverage where I'm at to get to where I want to go. So every single thing that I've ever done in my life, from photography to my podcast to writing a book, I didn't just abandon every single thing and say, I am going all in on this new thing and I hope it works out. Because here's the thing. We are multi-passionate creative humans, and we have to do everything in our power to protect our creativity. And if you want to know two things that will stomp your creativity before you even start, it's deadlines and money. The second that you add deadlines or you add this financial obligation to anything, it removes your creativity. And so I think we've lost the art of like appreciating the side hustle.
Amen.
Because side hustles allow you to experiment. They allow you to try things. They allow you, it's just like going into a fitting room and trying on clothes. Some of them fit and some of them don't. And you and I have done many different things. Some of them have worked and some of them haven't, but we've kind of lost that art. And I feel like our culture is like, go big or go home. But I'm like, wait a minute, like, what if we leverage what we've currently got going for us, something that gives us safety and security, and use that to work to preserve our creativity so that we can try things without this like success and failure scale. I think that is something that we're getting wrong. And I also think it's like so important to acknowledge like side hustling is amazing. And it gives you the space to say this works or this doesn't work, or this feels good or this doesn't feel good.
Okay, Jenna. So people on the outside, when you're like, we have gone through a lot of changes. Some things worked and some things didn't. But on the outside, it doesn't look like that, Jenna. It looks like you're on a comet and like the comet's being carried by a chariot of like unicorns and like you're sprinkling glitter. And like, so somebody looks at that and says like, what have you tried that hasn't worked, but you treated it like a side hustle or like a kind of like a gestation period? Yeah.
Did you know I had a watercolor print shop? On Society 6. It's still there. So if anyone Googles it, it's terrifying. I painted watercolors. I did senior portraits for a summer, which I hated. I have done so many different things. I've done consulting for different launches. Didn't like that because I wasn't in control. There are different things. I used to do one-on-one mentoring. Like there's all these different things that I tried and I learned something from each of them.
Good for you.
And then the other thing that I think is important to note too is like, so for the last 4 years, so basically when I got pregnant for the third time with my now daughter, Coco, I decided like, I am saying no to like all things that require me to be away from home. And I just hit the brake pedal, set up that boundary. And it's been really interesting because now I'm feeling called to go back into that world again. And there's been this like piece in like, I hit the brake pedal, but I've always known where the gas pedal is. And when I'm ready to hit it, I can accelerate forward. And so it's interesting because it's like, we as humans are meant to evolve and change our minds and grow and learn and stretch. But we've kind of lost that because we want to show is like the before and after, like the actual transformation. We're so not good at showing the middle parts. And that's why it's like, we think people are riding on comets when really it's like, no, I've just tried a lot of things and I've stayed in alignment. Each time something no longer serves me, I'm not afraid to let that part of me go so that something new can be reborn.
And that balance, like what the word that comes to me so strongly is bravery. We don't look at it like that, but when I hear you just say like I'm letting go of something that doesn't serve me, a lot of times people are like, well, that's risk, but that's also a form of bravery. So this book, I wanted to have a conversation around business owners using this as an opportunity to open their minds up to having the opportunity to pivot.
Yes.
Now, when we talk about this book, like having a candid conversation, what do you think this book is opening you up for? Like, how are you using it to facilitate a pivot in your life?
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And I haven't been able to talk about this anywhere. So this is exclusive. You know, it's really interesting because when I first started writing, I did everything backwards. So I talked about protecting my creativity, and I did that so fiercely in the book writing process because for years and years and years, I said, I will never write a book. And I said that with certainty. Like it wasn't just like, I was like, I will never do this. And so when I finally changed my mind and was like, I'm going to do this, I really did it in a way that protected my creativity.
Okay, but wait, okay, so don't lose that train of thought because that's so powerful. I know I have a feeling this is going to be so good. But talk to me, at what point did you make what happened for you to say, oh, I think it's time for me to write?
Yes. So here's what happened. This is crazy. I booked a massage. Let me tell you this story. It was 2020. It was like the height of the pandemic. Things were just starting to open back up again. And it was it was our 10-year anniversary. And I was like, we got to do something sweet. We were in a town of 1,200 people, like 2.5 hours away from a nearest Target. So there's not a lot of options. Booked this massage. Something happened with the scheduling. So they called me and they're like, can you come in now? We've got a different person here that can do it for you. And her name was Thea. And I got there and she said, I'm an intuitive healer and I'm going to be doing your massage today. And I was like, sounds great. I need a rub down. So I lay on the table and the whole time I'm like, is she reading my mind? Does she know that the pressure is too firm? Can she tell that I'm a little hot on this table? Anyways, I finish up and she goes, do you have any questions for me? And at that point, we were thinking about expanding our family again. And I held a lot of fear around just what that journey would look like. And so I said, we really want to have another baby. And, we've suffered a lot of losses and I just don't know. And she goes, no, that's not what came up. She's like, there is something you need to do and you know what it is and you're fighting it. And I need you to go out and do it. And she said that. And with utter clarity, she goes, do you know what I'm talking about? And I was like, it's writing a book. And it was like the first gut reaction. And I had no plans to do it. I didn't have it on my vision board. I didn't have an agent or a deal. I didn't have anything. And literally that night after she said that, she goes, the book needs to come before the baby. And I was like, okay, now I have a deadline. I really want to have another baby. And that night I literally went home and opened up a Google Doc and started typing. And this actually plays into what we were talking about, because I have this problem that a lot of people have with making things very complex so that I don't take action. Like perfectionism leads to procrastination and I overcomplicate everything. And I was like, I am not going to do that this time, because even if I write a book that only I read or that only matters to me, this has to matter enough to spend time on it. And so instead of saying like, well, I need to get the agent and then I need to do the proposal and I need to get the book deal, I just started writing. Like I actually did the thing that would move me closer to the thing. It's like when I started my podcast, I was so worried about the logo and the format and the intro music, and I didn't record like the one thing required to have a podcast. And so I just started writing. And it's really interesting because I think that for me, the whole process just like unfolded in such a beautiful way, in a way that I wanted to write words that tell, not words that sell. And part of the problem with the culture these days is it's like monetize your passions, like just what you're passionate about, figure out ways to get paid. And I think that's beautiful if you can do that. But I also think if you can just start creating for the sake of creating, something beautiful will be born. So when I started writing, I wrote a business book. I like boxed myself in the corner of like, I'm the host of the Gold Digger podcast. I talk about marketing. I'm going to write a business book. And in the business book, I had a lot of the stories that are now in today's not business book called How Are You Really? And by the time I started the formal stuff with the agent and the editor, they were like, hey, we're not entrepreneurs, but we need this. Like we need these messages about body image and checking in with yourself and resting and like all of these different things. And they were like, this applies to so many more people. And I literally had this visual of like our photography days of like zooming out. I was like, I was so zoomed in on this idea of entrepreneurship that I literally had to like widen the lens and be like, where do I want to see this on the shelves? Like, where does this belong? And like, who does this serve and who is it for? And so it was really interesting for me because once I started expanding it, I realized like I love marketing and strategy because it creates the systems that allow me to live the type of life I want to live. Like I love entrepreneurship because I am someone who wants to have a life of peace and ease. Now, does everyone that wants a life of peace and ease have to be an entrepreneur? No. So how do I take this life philosophy and widen the lens on it outside of entrepreneurship and show people that whether you work a 9-to-5 or you're a stay-at-home parent or you're a caretaker, whatever that is, that you can have a life that is peaceful and has ease and that you're actually awake to. And so it was a really interesting thing. So it really naturally is opening up my brand to talk about some of the things I've wanted to talk about and to kind of pivot all of the strategies and things that I love and that come naturally to me, but to show entrepreneurs like this is how you can build something that actually gives you back your life, doesn't take over it. And so it's been a really interesting like change.
Okay, so let's talk about the change, because a lot of times Brene Brown calls it gold-plated grit. It's something you had alluded to earlier today. We love the before and afters.
Yeah.
And so if we were to zoom in
Yeah.
At this point in time, it's almost like a really glorious middle. Not everybody in their middle stage can say, I'm a New York Times bestseller. I've made, done really amazing things. This is the messy middle. People look at that like, girl, that's your mess. Yeah. Bless that mess. Yeah. Bless that mess. But for you, when you're looking at this, like I'm in the middle and I'm asking myself, what shelf does this book belong in? What's coming up for you? What doors do you think it will open or is opening? What do you say what do you think you might be saying no to? Where is that?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So if I could have my dream business, which I will, and I'm working on it, it would be that I would literally keep writing because I loved it. I loved every part of the process. I would run my podcast and I would affiliate for a few courses each year. I have taught courses for the last 5 years of my life and I love it. But I've realized that like I am in a season of life. I'm so deep on integrity and like I teach a great Instagram course, but I no longer follow my own strategies because my life has changed. Like I am not posting Monday through Friday and covering all these topics. And like the fact that I am not in integrity with a system I know works means to me that it is time to like put that one on the shelf.
Okay, wait, there is just so much going on right here. Whoa, okay. I want to be very clear. Yeah. I want to be very clear. Y'all, my friends who are listening, what Jenna just said was I taught a course. Now people are like, wait. I know Jenna as like a podcast and an author and like mega podcast. And now we can say mega author. Before that, Jenna started her photography career and grew wildly successful within that, and then decided my life is taking a change and I don't want anything that requires me to be somewhere when I'm going through very ups and downs moments, very emotionally taxing. So she puts that parameter in her life. And then in that time, she starts teaching other people what is serving her and her business extraordinarily well. So she gets into course creation. Now, that was something that we kind of like left out up into this point in the conversation. And so then what Jenna is saying is that is good and that works and that is powerful. But because she is really focused on what her integrity is, it is a viable source of revenue, of income. As a business strategist, why close a funnel? And what she's saying is what I am beholden to could also be the thing that holds me back to where I want to go. So she is taking a big, bold, messy middle decision to say, you want to know what? That was good for where it was. Now my strategy is changing. So you are practicing what you're preaching. I wanted to connect the dots for people who might not have been like, wait, what? Where did this come from?
Where are we going? Yes.
So you're author, podcaster, and very strong advocate and affiliate for other courses that you're like, they're doing the dang thing.
Yeah. I'm like, I want to connect my people to the people who are still so invested in this. And it's wild because like I have had massive success as a course creator and I love my courses. Like they're still there, but they're probably going to be transitioning out. And that's where I'm like, I recognize that like I love online courses. They changed my life. But like, how can I support people that are so obsessed with what they're creating? And how do I do that? And I am so good at the marketing and the strategy. So all I have to do is bring people to the people who are doing the serving. And that like changes everything for me. So yeah, so it's been interesting because the other thing is like speaking on stages, I said no to everything. Like, cause I was just like, I just want to be home. And recently I said yes to Ed Milet. He had a book that came out and he was like, I never ask you anything. Will you come speak at my event? And he's like, I know you say no to everything. For you, buddy.
But here's the thing. Ed has so much street credibility. He's one of those people that just give. So when Ed asks you or invites you, like, girl, that's like an honor. Come on, Jenna.
And I was like, yes, for you, I will. And what was so beautiful is it was the first time I was on a stage in front of actual humans in years because of COVID. It was all digital stuff. And I like loved it again. And I was like, I am so glad I said yes to this because I have been saying no very confidently. And it almost like cracked the door open of like, oh, maybe I do want to do this again. And maybe this is really like invigorating. And, you know, the conversations you have backstage, that is life-giving. It's almost like little masterminds because you get to be with other speakers who are really driven and inspirational. And like, I just like opened this door where I like came home and like talked to Drew and I was like, so I know for the last 4 years, I've said no to everything, but how do we feel about saying yes to certain things again? And that feels really good to me because I think too, sometimes when you become a mom, you create these really firm boundaries for different seasons of your life. And you kind of wonder, like, is this it for the rest of my life? Like, is this where I land? Or, is my ambition different? Or what does this look like? And I think it's such a beautiful reminder, again, of like, we can hit the brakes and always know where the gas pedal is. And what got us this far will carry us forward, if and when we're ready to deploy it. And so it's like interesting for me to be in a season where I'm like, I'm saying a few more yeses than I used to. And like, they feel really good. And I like look at my calendar and I'm excited about it. And so, yeah, it's just this constant reinvention. And I think for anyone listening who's like, there are certain things in my life that I've said no to, or I said I would never do it, and now I'm feeling that little nudge. This is your invitation to change and to like celebrate that change. I think there's nothing more inspiring. We talk about the before and after. Nobody's showing that middle. But when you bring people on that journey with you, that's what me and Jasmine have done for decades, is literally said, hey, I'm trying this new thing and I'm going to try to figure it out. And I'm going to take you along with me. And like, we're going to see what happens. But like, that's where I think you actually inspire more people and where you change more people's lives. And so I feel like every morning I'm literally like waking up and being like, and which version of you are you going to be today? Or who are you becoming? And every night when I kiss Coco, my 3.5-year-old, and put her down for bed, I say, I love who you are, but I love even more who you're becoming. And I want to invite this idea of like, you can change. Like, you are not just one thing. You do not just have one role on this planet. Like, I love every aspect of you, but I also like who you're in pursuit of becoming.
So two things are coming up for me, and we can take whichever one. I want to get to both if we can. Yeah. So number one, we talk about the messy middle, and we talk about how you and I have been pretty open about sharing, like, I'm going to go on this new adventure. I really don't know what it is. And I actually co-sign on that strongly. We do. Question number one is, have you ever felt like pushback or negativity, or as a result of sharing what you are going through? Because people often worry, if I share that the negativity is going to come, and if the negativity has come, how then did you address it? And then number two would be, we talk about how for you, a mechanism of pivoting at this current point in time has been this book. It's brand new. It's opening new doors. It's challenging the preconceived notion of who Jenna Kutcher was, and challenging who you are as a podcast host of like this mega podcast, Gold Digger. Okay, so what do you hope the pivot facilitates? So there's two entirely different paths, and I'm like, maybe we could talk fast and get through it all.
Yes, let's do it. Okay. So first things first, one thing that I found super unique, especially even in launching a book, is it's always fascinating to like come out with a new identity. Like the day after I got New York Times, Drew rolled out and he was like, "Good morning, New York Times bestselling author."
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't even like, I struggle to even say I'm an author, even though I have a book out. You know what I mean? Like it's really, it's still these like growing pains of like, okay, who am I? What does this mean? And one thing that I've really noticed and had to like keep coming home to through every phase of the journey is that you'll notice whenever you change in your life, whether you change your health habits or a relationship or your career, there are going to be people right there cheering you on, like full on support. And there are going to be people who are quiet, who you thought would show up for you. And one thing that I've recognized a lot, because we've struggled with this, even with like some close family members who like won't even acknowledge like our lives or what we do or how we do it, is that our change makes them uncomfortable because they're staying the same. And I've had to recognize that like the right people show up for you and in the right way. And like the negativity or even the people who just don't even want to say, like, you see them watching your Instagram stories, but they never acknowledge like the change. It's usually out of their own insecurity that they're still stuck, that they haven't moved forward. And for a lot of my life, I've just been like, you know what, leave them behind. Like they don't know. But lately I've been having this really different pivot where I'm like, how can I bring them on the journey? How can I let them know that like I see them and I just want to invite them into what's going on? And maybe that'll inspire them. And so, yes, negativity comes with anything, but honestly, it's so wild because even with the book, I find myself like reading all the reviews, the good, and I mean, there's 99% good and 1% negative, but I'm like, wow, you know what? This book wasn't for that person, but it sounds like they still got something out of it. And it's like a good reminder of like, wait, like the right people you create for are going to obsess over it. And the people who aren't the right fit, hopefully they walk away with something, but it's not meant for them. And it's been interesting because I am a very sensitive person. Like I am not the person who's like, don't read the comments. Like I read every comment because I'm like, is there feedback in this? Like, is there a way to do better? But at the same point too, I'm like, a lot of times when people are uncomfortable with you changing, it's mostly because they're stuck. And so how do we just invite them into the journey if they're ready to have their own evolution? Now, the second side of that, of your question of like, how is this brand expanding and stuff? Like, I just feel like, I talk about this literally when the book kicks off, like 5 pages in, where I'm like, I am so sick of surface level conversations. Like, I just want to dive deep. And I feel like so many people are walking through this world feeling so lonely, not because they're not surrounded by people, but because they're not fully known. And I was recently with my college roommate. So we have known each other over half of our lives. And they said to me, because they both read the book and there's parts of the book inspired by them. And they were like, finally, the world gets to know the Jenna that we've always known. And that really opened my eyes, because it's like, we have these different roles and we show up as different versions of ourselves, whether it's on the podcast or as a mom or whatever. And I feel like this was like the most raw version of me, like the most vulnerable version of me. And it really has enriched all of the conversations I'm having. And I also think it's added depth to the brand. And something that people don't realize about a book is that it is a tangible thing. Like, you and I are in the business of digital products, right? But this is now like this tangible thing that is in people's lives, that is in people's homes. And it's such a different like entry point into the brand, right? Like, it almost sets like, here is the life philosophy. Now you can take all these strategies and things, but you're putting them through the lens of like, the reason why Jenna teaches it this way is because she wants you to wake up to your life. Like, she wants you to enjoy your life and stop faking it. And so I feel like it's this beautiful extension of the resource library that is already hundreds of blog posts and hundreds of podcast episodes. But it's like, start here. Here's ground zero. Here's the foundation, and everything else will make sense when you know it's through this lens. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So what I want to do now is, as we kind of tie this up, somebody's listening and they say, well, that works for Jenna as a podcast host, as a speaker, as a mother, as an educator, and as an author. But there could be somebody who's listening and saying, I am not any of those. And so what I want to do is I want to use the book as a symbol that's empowering the pivot. And it could look different for somebody else. Somebody else might be listening, and it could be a watercolor shop that they want to build as a pivot of some sort. So let's look at the thing, whatever the thing is. At this point in time in your career, the thing is the book. But there's somebody else who's listening, and the thing is their bake shop. Their thing is a t-shirt store. Their thing is them creating their first online digital course. Cool. So what philosophy, what perspective can we look at the thing and say, this is going to help me pivot? What are we looking for? What are we expecting of it? What do we want? What's the Jenna Kutcher approach to foundational when we look at this thing that we're moving away from and we're not sure where we're really running to, but it could be this. What is the frame and perspective that we should be carrying as we start this pivot?
Yes. Okay. So here's something super fascinating that I've been just reflecting on, because I'm like, okay, this book like launch and everything has just been so interesting. So in the last 4 years, how I said no to everything. In the last 4 years before my book launch, I had done a total of 4 interviews. So 1 interview a year for other people's shows. When my book came out, I did over 77 interviews. It gave me a reason to put myself out there and say, I have something I want to share about. Will you let me share?
That's it.
And it was crazy too, because it's like a lot of our lives, it's like, we're kind of just like light launching things. Like we're just, dabbling a little bit more.
Yes.
It's like when you get one thing, I don't care what it is, you care about it. Like you want to share about it. You want to talk about it. The second part is, and this is something you'll love because you actually probably taught me this over a decade ago, was I had to go through and like review my website, review my social, like show like, here is what I am doing now. Yeah. And I was like catching all of these things on my website where I was like, oh, this is outdated, or like, this isn't what I want to be doing anymore. How do we change the language here? And so it's like, you want to do an identity audit almost, whether it is online or in your life of like, here is how I'm showing up. And you want to talk first and foremost about the things you want to be doing more of. You used to say like, show what you want to shoot. Like when I go to your website, I want to see the things that you want to create. Don't show things that you don't want to do anymore. And I think a lot of us are holding on to past identities or not really even looking for opportunities to say, here's the upgrade. Here's version 2.0 that's coming out soon. And this is what it's going to look like. So that was really helpful for me too, because it was like, I'm taking a full inventory of all of the places I'm showing up and making it so clear that I'm an author now. The third part of that would just be like how you are clothing yourself in that identity. So what I mean by that is like, for me, I cannot change overnight, like anything. Like I take time to really like honor the evolution. And so part of me thinks like in this culture, it's so black and white. And we're like, you know, you do this or you don't do this. You say this or you don't say this. And I live in this place of gray. And so I had to build up my belief and my confidence to follow through on something as massive as a book. And so I talk about in the book how, like, imagine if I was like, hey, Jazz, let's go sit outside and we're going to watch this tree grow. You and I would not pull up a lawn chair and sit and watch it because it would be so boring to see that. But underneath the surface, the roots are lengthening. They are strengthening. They are really ensuring that this tree is going to grow big. I want the kind of growth that nobody can see. I want to experience like the root stretching growth that you can't show on Instagram, that no one's going to notice, but that you know is firming up your foundation. And so for me, it was like, how am I showing up and just writing even a couple paragraphs? How am I, you know, changing my identity to believe like I can be an author? I am an author. And so I just think in a culture where it's so like, we want fast transformation. We want to show the change, like focus on the change that builds your belief in yourself, because how you feel about yourself impacts how you show up in every area of your life. And so that's the kind of transformation that I want somebody to have. They have an idea. If it takes just 5 minutes of your day to move you one step or 1 inch closer, that's the kind of change that we have to focus on as a culture that is so obsessed with like overnight success.
Ladies and gentlemen, if this is your first time around with the Miss Kutcher, bless it all. We started the conversation by highlighting how our paths intersected, and you might be at a point in your life where you're experimenting and meeting people who have a wild transformative effect. So what you've just experienced is a decade-long parallel race of people pulling up lawn chairs and watching the tree that is Jenna and watching the tree that is myself grow. I want to say thank you so much for reminding us that we get to own our identities and that we get to, first and foremost, experiment. We don't know what we're running to exactly, but we know what we're running away from. And then having the courage to not put expectation on whatever the side hustle, passion is without having the clear plan or demanding money from it. And then having the strength and the wherewithal and the courage to close off what isn't serving us, even though it probably seems crazy to everybody and their mother. And then lastly, stepping into the identity that you want to become, that you have the opportunity to change your opinion, to become a different person, to be the owner of the story, and to show what you want to shoot. That is a shout out to all the photographers out, you know, all the photographers on the place. Show what you want to shoot, which is another terms. If you are not a photographer, put out the thing you want to do and become. That takes a lot of courage. And when we get to see somebody like you, Jenna, do it so well and practice what you preach and share the messy middle, although your messiness, not average, honey. It ain't average. It ain't average, but it's so good to see. And it's so refreshing. Thank you for making yourself vulnerable. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for being open for people who want to dive deeper and knowing you as an author, podcaster, and very strong affiliate and advocate for others. Where do they go? Give us the deets.
Yes, you can head to jennakutcher.com, and the book is called How Are You Really? And you can get it anywhere books are sold, or you can go to howareyourreallybook.com. And then I'm at Jenna Kutcher on all the platforms. And I just have to say, you were my first hero, idol, human that showed me what's possible. And I really think it's crazy and such a beautiful reminder that like when we show up, whether it's in the messy middle or living in the after, like it paints possibility for people. And you were the possibility painter of like, this type of life is possible. And it's just been such a beautiful reminder. There's a story, a chapter in the book called What Brooke Shields Doesn't Know. And it's the power of our stories. And so just thank you for always showing up with yours, because it literally changed my entire trajectory. And man, we have come a long way.
We've come a long way. Y'all, Jenna Kutcher is the real deal. Go and leave a review for her book, because y'all know she's going to read it. 5-star only. 5-star only. So Jenna, thank you 1,000 times over. JennaKutcher.com. You are a blessing. Be blessed. Thank you, friend. I appreciate you.